Why is it that criminality is so overrepresented among boys with single mothers? Why is it that teen pregnancy is so common, almost predictable in fatherless girls? We have this idea in our mind, what adults want is king. Love makes a family, and they don't need mothers and fathers, they just need guardians.
You think it's as morally wrong as
Talking about...
that? I mean, that's drastic, isn't it?
Children have a hard time answering the question, who am I? That is intimately connected to knowing who our own mother and father are. Stepmothers tend to buckle the seatbelts less of their stepchildren, take them to the doctor less. We can actually measure the increased risk and the decreased investment when it's unrelated adults in the home.
For me, how do we increase the human population? This means gay people having children. I think that is a good thing.
The solution is not to normalize motherless and fatherless homes, treat children as commodities through reproductive technologies in the name of adult equality. And I'm not a pro-family advocate. I'm a child advocate.
Would you advocate that it should be illegal for gay parents to have children? Katy Faust, welcome to the show. Great to have you here. You are a children's rights activist and author of several books, Stand Before Us, Why We Need a Global Children's Rights Movement. And you have been an advocate for particularly children's rights with regards to gay marriage is probably what you're maybe most famous for. But if you think I'm wrong, you do correct me. I wanted to talk to you because we're in this new age. On the show, we've covered a lot of the birth crisis, demographic crisis, and how women are having children later and later, and fewer and fewer of women are having children, particularly in the West. I wanted to look at another angle of that, which is surrogacy, the effect of adoption. You have an adopted child, the effect of different family setups, the effect of divorce on children, all sort of the other component in this new world of the family. So before we dive into these highly contentious topics, which I have no doubt you're going to make me look like a raging wokie, but perhaps we can start with a bit of your story.
Sure.
So I hope you don't mind me asking, but you were raised by lesbian parents, is that?
Not quite.
Not quite.
My parents were married until I was 10, and then they divorced. And then my father dated and remarried, but very soon after that, my mom repartnered with a woman. So I always had my father in my life, before the divorce and after the divorce. And they had a pretty amicable split. So I was able to get equal time with them, even though it wasn't full time with either of them. And my mom and her partner have been together for 40 years. And I'm actually going to see them in like 5 days. So I'm still very close to them. I've never had any conflict or resentment or major frustrations towards them. They've actually totally defied the odds in terms of long-term stability for any couple, but certainly for lesbians. And they've always been a part of my children's life. So this is not the story of like a disgruntled, woman with daddy issues who is campaigning against the gays. It actually is more the story of I had an unconventional upbringing that taught me to be really comfortable with gays and lesbians, to be honest. Like before I started my public writing and advocacy 15 years ago, that's more of my default disposition is I just want to be in relationship with people. And I'm very, very comfortable with those that disagree and choose to live differently. And I don't consider my mother's partner to be my mother, but I do consider her to be my friend. So I think a lot of people will kind of spin it as, oh, she has an axe to grind.
So not a stepmother,
not
actually
a
friend.
Yeah, as a friend.
Okay.
And the nice thing is with my father's girlfriends or future wives and my mother's partner, one thing my parents did very well is they never allowed or presented their romantic partners as parents to me. They always kind of retained that primary parental role in my life. And that's smart. When people break up and repartner with new step families or live-ins or whatever, it's a big mistake to then suddenly hand off and grant those new adults in a child's life total parental authority over them.
Uh-huh.
So,
what then at what point on the journey if it is the case that you had such a good relationship with your mother and her partner, then for you to now be quite an outspoken advocate about the downsides of children in gay relationships, or I've not actually heard you say you're against gay marriage necessarily, although maybe we can...
I'm 100% against gay marriage.
Oh, right, okay.
Absolutely. Like that's actually what got me into this whole thing to begin with, is in 2012, right after President Obama evolved on the topic of gay marriage. He ran as a supporter of traditional marriage in 2008. He got into office in 2012 as a supporter of traditional marriage. And very soon after that, he evolved. And he said, actually, now I support gay marriage. So It
was legalized in 2015 in the US
right.
and 2014 in the UK.
Yes. And so a couple of years before that, you had this big cultural shift, right, especially among the left. And what I felt at that time, I had no kind of platform. I had no ambitions to be in the public eye at all. What I heard after his evolution was a sea change in the media, where now they're like, oh, we've got the president. Now we can present this emerging cultural conversation, not as here's two different sides of a challenging topic, but here's the virtuous, moral people, and here's the evil bigots. And so right after they got the president, now the presentation was anybody that opposes gay marriage is a hateful, homophobic bigot. And that was just the line everywhere. So I reacted against that because I'm like, this is ridiculous. Like, I support traditional marriage and I love my mother and her partner. Like, you're slandering a huge percentage of the American public. But the real reason why I got into it is because the whole conversation about marriage obsessively focused on adult identity and their backstory and their longings and their losses and their dignity. And the children were completely forsaken. Children did not have a part of that conversation unless they presented it as, oh, and kids with two moms or two dads, they fare no different. They do just as well.
Which we'll come to, but it does sound like, so the first part is a reaction about sort of what is basically progressive tactics in rhetoric and dialogue.
Yes.
Which is not the issue itself. It's a separate secondary issue.
Yeah.
And the second thing is what I had understood, which is that it's about children.
It is about children.
And so your focus is on the children rather than the marriage, which is why I'd come to that understanding, listening to what I've heard of your, read of your work.
Yeah.
But back to your project then. So if it is the case that you've come out hardline on this topic, despite your very positive relationship with your mother and her partner, as you described, at what point then did you take me on that journey? Because that seems like that's not a normal journey. Most people, if you did indeed have a good relationship, you'd maybe expect that you'd maybe even be an advocate for lesbian marriage. You could have taken a very different path. So why then have you taken this different route?
Can I back up and explain what it means to advocate for children's rights, and then that might help?
Sure.
Okay. So there are hundreds of organizations, as far as I can tell, that are defending children's fundamental natural right to life, and that's great. We need all of them because children's right to life is under threat by both abortion and reproductive technologies. But children's natural right to their own mother and father is not something that even a majority of Christian or conservatives are able to articulate. So my nonprofit advocates for children's rights on this side of the womb, their right to be known and loved by the two people responsible for their existence. And we know that these two people distinctly benefit children in ways that unrelated adults do not. So very quickly, I'll tell you the 3 ways that a child's own mother and father advantage them. The first one is children have a hard time answering the question, who am I? If they can't answer the question, whose am I? There is something about our identity formation that is intimately connected to knowing who our own mother and father are. We know this because we have surveyed children created through sperm and egg donation who overwhelmingly struggle more with identity struggles. We know this because we have shifted adoption policy in the United States completely away from closed adoptions to now the default is open adoptions. About 95% of adoptions in the United States are open because even adoptees who will say, I'm so glad I was raised by my adoptive parents who loved me and cherished me and maybe rescued me, I still long to know who my first family is. And there's answers that they can give me that my adoptive parents can't.
What does open adoption mean?
It means that the child has some knowledge of, relationship with, and connection to their birth mother or birth father or first family. Whereas closed adoptions where you don't need identifying information, you don't need to have a relationship with them, maybe you don't even need to know that you're adopted. We have all in the adoption world conclusively decided that that is bad for kids. It actually leads to worse outcomes. Openness leads to better outcomes, even if the child can't be raised by their first family. So the first reason why a child's own mother and father benefit them is identity. There's something special about being connected to your biological mother and father. The second reason is safety. We do not have to ask about the conditions that lead to a child being safe and loved. I mean, all of us for years, we have said, well, kids don't need biological parents. They just need to be safe and loved. Kids don't need a mother and father. They just need loving guardians. Well, we have been doing family structure for decades, and we know the conditions that lead to children being safe and loved. And without question, it is children being raised in the home of their married biological mother and father. There can still be abuse in those situations, but any other household configuration where the child loses a mother and father or is raised by an unrelated adult drastically increases risk of abuse and neglect. So if it's a mother and her live-in boyfriend, if it's a father and his new wife, it's a mother and her new girlfriend or wife, or a father and his new boyfriend and husband. It really doesn't have to do with sexual orientation at all. It has to do with a child's own biological mother and father are statistically the most connected to, invested in, and protective of them. And unrelated adults always increase risk of abuse and neglect. So that's the second reason, safety. The third reason is if a child is raised by their two biological parents.
Wait, just to be more precise, it's not always increase the likelihood, but they're not always more abusive. Because there's plenty of good step-parents.
There are heroic step-parents.
And that's a very honorable thing to do, by the way.
Absolutely. It needs to be acknowledged, and they need to be encouraged.
It's very difficult to take on someone else's children as your own and love them.
Why?
I mean, why is that difficult?
Yeah.
Well, it goes against for a male, it goes against some instincts. You know, you want that all your children are your own. And so I can imagine that's very difficult. So that those who do it, more on to them.
Good. You're exactly right. What you just expressed has actually been identified on a sociological level with such precision and such regularity that they have a name for it. And it is the Cinderella effect. That it is so unlikely that a man or a woman is going to care for the children in their home as if they were biological children. That is such an exception that we have a term for the kind of risks and conditions that children with unrelated adults in the home have to face, especially if that child especially if it's a romantic relationship with the child's biological parent. And that term is the Cinderella effect. It is measurable, it is observable, and it's not a religious argument. This is an argument made by evolutionary biologists that especially an unrelated man left to care for the child himself is statistically, and I always say statistically because there's wonderful exceptions, statistically the most dangerous person in a child's life. That's not to say that all stepfathers are abusive or all live-in girlfriends are going to deprive children of more food. But we actually can measure those things. Like stepmothers tend to buckle the seatbelts less of their stepchildren, take them to the doctor less, save less money for their college, spend less money on their food. These are not things that are abstract or like speculations. We can actually measure the increased risk and the decreased investment when it's unrelated adults in the home. There are always exceptions, wonderful exceptions that need to be validated and praised. But there's no way that you can swap out a biological parent and swap in an unrelated adult on a population-wide level that will ever benefit children the way their own married mother and father will.
Okay, so that's fair enough to make the case, and why I even wanted to have the conversations. I think it's worth understanding what the downsides are. But it's also the case that you don't want to legislate against that. You want to help those parents be better parents. And
Which parents?
Let's say the step parents. You can't. A society where, let's say, orphan children or families where one of the parents is killed or is lost, you want to help them rebuild. And I mean, isn't it even in Scripture, blessed are those who take widows and orphans? So it's encouraging and helping. That's an honorable thing, right? You're not suggesting that we clamp down on that and we do things to impede that from happening.
I think that there's a difference between seeking to redeem a lost situation and normalizing and promoting family structures where a child's mother or father is always going to be absent. So you can, even to a further degree, you can permit adults to make all kinds of consensual decisions, but you should only promote the one family structure where a child doesn't have to lose their mother or father to be in it. So those are two very different things. And when you want to talk about caring for the orphan and the widow, which absolutely is not just a mandate for Christians, but I would say a good template for a just society in general, what you're talking about there is the insistence that adults do hard things for children, the insistence that the strong sacrifice for the weak. But what you do when you are normalizing modern family structures or redefining marriage or promoting reproductive technologies where you can swap sperm and egg and womb and come up with any and every household configuration, you're not talking about defending the fatherless or protecting the orphan. You're talking about manufacturing the fatherless and legally incentivizing orphanhood. So these are two different things.
Okay, but I think you're going into topics I want to cover with you.
Yes.
That's somewhat a separate thing. But just to is the point that you're saying that by having policy, that is a version of promotion? So
yes, you're going to
by having the Divorce Act, for example, come in, actually we saw an increase of a drastic increase of divorces and broken home, and eventually you saw fewer marriages in the first place. So the policy of the easier divorce meant fewer people got married in the end.
That is very often the case. In the United States, we have a laboratory of democracy over there. I don't know if you've heard, but 50 different states that do things 50 different ways, and you get to see the impact that it has on the population. And what we saw overwhelmingly was that once no-fault divorce laws were passed, right? Once it was easy out of a marriage, fewer people wanted to get into the marriage. It actually became higher risk to get into a marriage because anybody can leave you for any time and any reason. You'll never see it coming. They'll take half your income and you won't see your children. And so that made people more hesitant to get into marriage.
Yes.
So yes, policy, right? What you incentivize, you get more of. And we've incentivized family breakdown. We've incentivized in many ways, culturally, legally, and technologically, we've incentivized the absence of a mother and father in a variety of different ways. So yes, policy has a huge hand in whether or not children are raised by their own married mother and father or whether they are treated as commodities to sort of be acquired by any and every adult. I do want to get back. You had a really good question. I don't want to lose it because you asked it twice. How did I get to this point then where I'm not advocating for gay marriage?
Yes.
And the answer is, if everything that the other side says is true, what that communicates is my mother has nothing special to offer me, right? She doesn't give me, if the other side, the modern family conception of how we should lay out family formation is true, what that means is biological identity is irrelevant.
Wait, so what is the modern family formation that you're...
I would say that
what is that?
Where we have arrived now is, and this is actually a huge result of gay marriage. What gay marriage did is it elevated two things that for the child will never be equal. A heterosexual family where in the norm of that family will be the child being raised by their own married mother and father, and a same-sex headed household where categorically children will never be raised by their own mother and father. And what gay marriage did is it elevated both of these to equivalence in the law. In fact, in the United States, it said it is discriminatory to prefer a child's own married mother and father above a same-sex headed household. So what that required in law is a flattening of all distinctions within the family. UK has experienced some of this. I'm really familiar with how it works in the United States. In the wake of gay marriage, our law, our parenthood statutes very often will no longer say mother and father. It will say parents. It will say guardians. We have created new pathways for adults to acquire children because a recognition of biological parentage is now considered discriminatory because two adults of the same sex will never be both biologically related. So we've created new pathways for them to acquire children. We have downgraded biology, right? And that's a major problem because children get their identity from their biological parents. They're most likely to be safe and loved when they're raised by their own mother and father. It means that we cannot make any kind of distinction and elevate a procreative relationship. A procreative relationship doesn't have anything special to offer the world, right? There's no way to have these two
I don't
pairings.
think that's fair. I don't think it suggests that a procreative relationship has nothing to offer the world. I think it does. It's just that they're creating more opportunity for more children and more families in the less normal routes for people who have that parental instinct, but don't have the other heterosexual instincts, say.
Are you familiar because I don't know as much about the UK. Are you familiar with any politician in the UK, any campaign in the UK, or any push maybe around like family formation that explicitly encourages heterosexual marriage or procreative relationships? Or is it more just we encourage families in general?
Britain, I'm not sure, but certainly you can look at some countries like Hungary, which are desperately trying to encourage families to have more and more children. And this is a topic we have covered on the show to do with the birth crisis.
Well, and they also have not legally flattened the contours of marriage and family law by insisting that same-sex and opposite-sex couples should be treated equally. And so they are allowed to prioritize heterosexual pairing and procreation because they understand that the heterosexual married relationship is distinct as it relates to the benefits to society. Great Britain can't do that, and the United States can't do that. We are constitutionally prohibited from elevating one family form above another in the name of adult equality.
I'll come back to what I think about that, but maybe you can finish your story.
Yes.
So how is it that you go from having a loving relationship with your mother and her female partner as a child to being now an advocate against gay adoption and gay parenting? Because
if the modern family premise is true, my mother's relationship to me has nothing special to offer. You could have swapped in two unrelated men, and in that world, I fare no different, and I'm just as well, and I'm so loved and wanted. But that's not true. My mother was so critical to my upbringing. Number one, she was very different from my father, as all mothers are. She nurtured, she connected. I think most of the things I do well as a mother, I do because that's how my mother mothered me. Just very, very emotionally in tune with the needs of my kids. My husband is wonderful, very sensitive, but does not have the same kind of nurturing insight to my kids. And my mother did too. So she mothered me in distinctly feminine ways, in ways that my father didn't. My father was wonderful in a very typical father way, rough and tumble, a lot of like pointing me towards adventure, encouraging me to take risks. But my mom was much more like keeping me grounded. So a man can't do that. Another thing is, I love to see myself in my mother. As I grow, sometimes I'll catch myself in the mirror. I'm like, I look kind of like she did, when I was a teenager. I delight in those resemblances. And then I delight in seeing her start to resemble my grandmother. She still mothers me. Like she will, when she comes to my house, she'll still find ways to nurture me, even as a grown woman. So what the modern family premise says is there's really nothing special about her to me, right? Really, the only thing that creates the contours of the family in the modern family world is adult consent and adult desire. Biology is irrelevant. Gender is irrelevant. Heritage is irrelevant. Stability is irrelevant. Permanence is irrelevant. All that matters in the world of the modern family configuration is, what do adults want? How do we validate their identity? But that means that children have to lose their mother or father to work into that configuration. So that whole world of modern family says that my mother is optional in my life, which is bonkers.
So you say, so your last point there about stability being irrelevant, I think the whole point of gay marriage is to give the opportunity for stability in between relationships which didn't have that necessarily and weren't encouraged it. So it was almost trying to incentivize stability in those types of relationship. And so stability, I don't see how it's quite disincentivized. It seems to me to be the opposite. And if gay partners are to have children, doesn't that increase the incentive for stability and longevity?
You are right. Gay marriage is not responsible for the loss of permanence in marriage. No-fault divorce did that, right? No-fault divorce. If there's three things that sets marriage apart from all of our other human relationships, different from our parent-child relationships, different from siblings, different from friends, different from business partners, there's three characteristics of that relationship that make it fundamentally different and distinctly valuable to society. The first one is permanence. It's supposed to last till death do you part. The second one is complementarity. It's supposed to involve both halves of the human species. And the third one is monogamy. It's supposed to only include those two adults in one marriage. So no-fault divorce is what rejected permanence. Complementarity was done away with gay marriage. And obviously, we're moving towards a world where there's going to be more and more acceptance of and promotion of polyamorous and polygamous relationships. The problem is each one of those have a very distinct child benefit. Children need the complementarity of a male and a female parent. They do different things, complementary, beneficial things for children. Women distinctly benefit children, especially in those early years as it relates to nurturing and bonding and attachment. Fathers, we have reams of data on the harms of fatherlessness in children. They are much more prone to all the different social ills, criminality in boys, teen pregnancy in girls, higher behavioral issues. I mean, there's no social that you can look at and say, that demographic is overpopulated with fatherless kids. Yeah. And then monogamy is so important to kids because if you have polyamory or polygamy, that just means unrelated adults are going to be sharing living spaces with children, and that will always redound to their insecurity and risk. Mm-hmm. So all of these three things are important when it comes to kids, and all three aspects of marriage are being destroyed. So your argument is, okay, gay marriage, it encourages permanence in gay relationships. But what that means for the child is that just means their mother or father will permanently be cut out of their life. So we don't want permanence from a child's perspective. From an adult's perspective, form the relationships you want. But from a child's perspective, the permanence of being in a relationship with two people who are not your parents is not necessarily better.
I don't think it's necessarily the case that the biological mother or father who's not part of the relationship is excluded. And I think the reason, actually, I think the value in this conversation as someone who comes from a different angle to you on this topic, although I haven't thought it through as much as you have, is that let's explore what the downsides are so that we can make the relationships better. And my gay friends who have kids, they are aware of some of these downsides. So introduce the mother, or they have the female energy or the male energy. Maybe they use a surrogate version. Maybe they have more males from the family, uncles or whatever it might be, to the more of a presence of the in-laws or whatever.
Why do they need that? Why do two women need a male presence?
Well, I agree with the idea that, in fact, the data I've seen is that children, as you said, without a father in the family, fare worse. In fact, they fare worse when they haven't got a father than when they haven't got a mother.
It's hard to know because our data on motherlessness is virtually non-existent, because it's very hard to make a motherless child in our species, and it's actually illegal to test mother deprivation on infants. We only do it on rodents because it's so detrimental to children. So it's hard to know, is it worse to be motherless or fatherless? The data on father loss is overwhelming. The data on mother loss is scarce.
Right.
Because typically when children would lose their mother 100 years ago, they would die. They don't live without mothers. And it's very hard to make a motherless baby. And it will be a long time before we can do adequate studies on children created from surrogate arrangements who were deprived of a mother all their life to see what that intentional commercial mother loss has, how that's impacted them.
Right. Okay. Perhaps I'll come at this from a different angle then, which is that I love life and I want more humanity. I want more life. And this is why I'm not woke, is because the big part of woke culture is kind of quite anti-human. Mm-hmm. And you can see this in the environmental stuff. So for me, how do we increase the human population? It's it's to encourage all people to have children, and through this means gay people having children, there's more life, and because I love life, I think that is a good thing. So that's probably my first principle here. But I'm prepared to have the conversation like you are putting to me the problems with that, but I think necessarily think they're insurmountable, but maybe they are because we don't have the data. Maybe it's unknown. This is all a new experiment. But presumably you're of the same opinion that more life is good life.
I don't think that I am not after life as the ultimate goal, and I'm not a pro-family advocate. I'm a child advocate. I'm an activist on behalf of the rights and well-being of the child. And so what that means is I believe that adults should conform their choices so that child rights and flourishing are protected. I don't think that the idea of we just need more life, even if it means that the rights and well-being of children are going to be implicated and damaged so that we can get that more life. I agree. The world needs more. You and I both know. Probably the greatest crisis that few people are talking about is the population implosion. And that is very, very serious. But the solution is not to normalize motherless and fatherless homes and treat children as commodities through reproductive technologies. The solution is to recognize that children are a gift. They have a right to life. They have a right to their mother and father. Without a shadow of a doubt, that is the vehicle that is going to lead to their flourishing. And it should be adults that conform and adjust their choices and their desires so that we don't just have life, but we have life that is born into the conditions where they're going to be exempt from a lot of the social ills that we're looking at today, where they're most likely demonstrably to have the best physical, mental, emotional, psychological, academic, and relational health. And we need to encourage that kind of life creation. So, you know, we can get into the world of reproductive technologies. A lot of people, I am definitely well known for challenging gay marriage, but we probably are one of the most public-facing voices against surrogacy for everybody.
I'd like to come to that, but before we do, just on this issue, because I think it's related. So another thing, I haven't seen the data on this, but I know people in my life, women who couldn't or didn't find a partner in time, but still wanted to be mothers, and so went it alone. And I'm sure they would have included males to replace the emptiness or the missing father figure. But again, my instinct is that more life is good, and if we're honest about the problems of not having a father, can we include the father? That would be a good thing. And so I'm removing the concept of the gay parenting.
Sure.
Although again, in your arguing, it's not actually, your arguments haven't actually been about against homosexuality. Your arguments have been about the missing
mother
energy.
and father.
Yeah,
right.
What's missing. So that's why it doesn't seem to be. I'm sure people could call you homophobic all the time, but it doesn't seem to be against homosexuality. It's the downsides of different family setups against the norm. That's kind of how I've understood it, right?
That's exactly right. And okay. I always tell people, give me enough time and I will piss you off too. Because this insistence that children have a right to their mother and father, no adult gets a pass. It's not like the heterosexuals can do whatever they want, right? This is a worldview that says single, married, gay, straight, fertile, and infertile conform to the rights of children because the only alternative is children sacrifice for adults. And that is categorically a world of injustice.
You think, even in the case of, let's say, a mother who wants to have a child, isn't that the mother making a huge sacrifice there?
A mother who wants to have a child alone.
She has it alone because she hasn't found a partner in time.
Yeah. Why do you think she wants that? What's special about that for her?
Well, there's a tremendous, I can understand it's not purely sacrifice, that she's getting something from it too.
Sure.
But it's also the case that, as you know, as a mother, it's no easy thing to be a mother, and she is sacrificing for another life. So it's not a simple. There's no. It's not a completely selfish act. Mm-hmm. Presumably, you agree. It's not a completely selfish.
Well,
act.
It is hard to become a parent. That's for sure. But what she is saying is, my longing to be a biological mother is more important than this child's longing to know their biological father. So like all the different things that you and I are looking at, if you look at it from the perspective of adult desire, adult longing, adult backstory, adult identity, all of it's justifiable. all of it. I'd say half of my job is whatever topic we're talking about, whatever trending news item there is pulling the spotlight off of adults who are saying, but I'm sad, but I want this, but this is my identity, but this is how I feel, taking it off of them and putting it on the child who has something to lose. Adults who want something will always present themselves as the victim. And I'm not diminishing that they have genuine struggles. But children who lose their mother and father are the victims. Why is it that her desire for a biological child is more important than that child's longing for their biological parent? Why? Somebody is going to do the hard thing. In this case, a single mother by choice is saying, my desire is more important than this child's fundamental right. So I think that that's problematic. And if you recognize that children need, talk to children with single mothers. Sometimes they'll say, oh, thank God there was this coach that kind of took me under his wing because, man, I really needed a dad at that time. But do you know what happens to fatherless children? Why is it that criminality is so overrepresented among boys with single mothers? Why is it that teen pregnancy is so common, almost predictable in fatherless girls? It is because children don't just need that developmental benefit of having a man in their life every day, which they do. Those children are going to take more risks. They're going to be more confident. Children hunger for male love. They hunger for it. They need it like food. And if they do not have a father in the home who is statistically the most connected to, invested in, and protective of them, they'll find a man to love them. They will find a man to love them. It will just be a gang leader who says, run these drugs for me. Or it will be a man who, for 5 minutes on a Friday night, says, baby, I love you more than anything else. And then she's a teen mother. We're starving children. When they do not have a male parent and a female parent, you're starving them of something that they need on a emotional level. We are depriving them. And it is because we have this idea in our mind that what adults want is king, and love makes a family, and kids are resilient, and they don't need mothers and fathers, they just need guardians. No. The data is clear. Natural law is clear. Reason and just what is common sense, self-evident is clear. Children come from a man and a woman. That man and woman benefit them in ways that unrelated adults do not. Men and women do distinct and complementary benefits,
Sure.
offer benefits to children. They give those kids their identity. And that is a wrecking ball. It's a wrecking ball for every
adult. So is
adult.
your position, would you advocate that it should be illegal for gay parents to have children?
I think that, again, you can permit adults to make consensual relationships on their own, but you should only promote the one family structure that does not force a child to lose their mother or father.
But if promotion comes through policy, as we've previously discussed, then that I go back to my question: would you have it be illegal? I
think that there's times where children are going to end up with same-sex headed homes, maybe because of a divorce situation and then a repartnering. But I think that just like heterosexual couples, those adults should have to go through adoption processes for the children in their home. It should not be this automatic, oh, you're married to the child's other parent, ding, you're the other mother. All third-party reproduction.
Adoption process as in like through the state?
Yes. Yes. Nobody should be able to acquire children without being biologically related or going through an adoption process. That's right. Heterosexual, homosexual, it does not matter. Biology affords a level of protectiveness that intending to parent or being in a romantic relationship with a child's other parent does not.
Not complete protectiveness, by the way.
Nope.
Obviously.
Just the best thing that our species has ever discovered and stumbled upon as it relates to child protection. It's not 100%. Mm-hmm. It's just drastically under 1%, like if you're looking at a population of 1,000.
Given that it's not 100%, as you admit, but you do want to have an adoptive process for, let's say, step-parents or adoptive parents, mm-hmm. Do you think that there should be a state intervention for all parents, just to be absolutely clear that everyone is capable of having a child? And if so, what exactly would the rules be? Who is and is not allowed to have a child? And I mean, I'm not presuming your answer, but as an American who loves freedom, would that not be a massive infringement on your liberties?
It would be a massive infringement on my liberties. And the good news is that unlike a lot of other systems, biology has done most of the work for us here. That there is something that takes place chemically and biologically in a man and a woman when they have a child. You literally can see the transformation in men. For example, after their wife gives birth, his testosterone drops by up to 40% for maybe 6 months, 3 to 6 months. What does that do? That literally conditions him to be more gentle with the child and to pursue intimacy with the wife at a lower level, so it gives her time to recover. His vasopressin rises at that time, it's the protective hormonal instinct that says, this is mine, don't touch it. Like, those are chemical changes that take place because of whatever kind of like pheromone interaction that he has with his pregnant wife and the baby that is born to her. I sometimes see these gay men who have children through surrogacy who 3 weeks later are out clubbing. And I'm like, that's not typically the behavior of a man whose wife has just given birth, because something is changing within his body, his own physiology. It's the same thing for women, that when the child is born to you, you already have this incredible, powerful in utero bond with that baby. It's not genetics based, right? It is this continuous exchange of information, blood with the child. You actually exchange chromosomes. There's this phenomenon called microchimerism, where the baby's cells will implant in the mother's brain for years to come. I mean, we find it in surrogates.
That happens outside the womb.
It's while the child is in utero.
Oh, in utero,
right?
Yeah, in utero.
Yes,
yeah.
There's an exchange even of genetics, which is mind-blowing. But then after the baby is born, biology has wired women to have constant connection with the child through breastfeeding, through her higher responsiveness to infant distress. So she is, the baby is cold, tired, hungry, afraid, and cries. Women have a higher responsiveness to infant cries. They're much more likely to jump up, grab the baby, hold the baby, pat the baby. Erica Komisar talks a lot about how babies don't have their own central nervous system. They don't have the ability to soothe themselves. The only thing that can drop cortisol level is an increase in oxytocin. But oxytocin can't be released on their own. It only happens through skin-to-skin contact. And the mother, her body specifically, drops cortisol faster than an unrelated, maybe genetic mother or a father. Skin-to-skin contact is beneficial generally, but is the birth mother who drops baby's cortisol level in ways that other adults do not. And so that process of oxytocin exchange, it regulates the child and helps them to develop the ability to soothe themselves in the future, but it bonds the mother to the baby too. So what biology has done for us, it is conditioned, not just in terms of this is my genetic offspring and I need to invest in them, but it actually has established these chemical processes that allow that man and that woman to be the safest adults in the child's life. There's exceptions. We just haven't found anything better. So should the government permit and screen people before they have their own biological children? The answer is hell to the no, because we will never create a system, in my opinion, that better screens adults than biology itself.
But your position is that the primacy is for the biological parent, but if that biological parent decides which should be the step parent to step in, let's say it's a widow or widower, they want to bring someone in, they actually have to have the state approve who they bring into the family. So that is quite a hard line compared to what the system we've got.
I think that I don't know what's happening in the UK. Step-parent adoption has been a thing in the United States for a long time. If you want to have full parental rights over your spouse's child, you need to go through step-parent adoption. So that's not
parental rights, but you don't have to get approval from the state if you want to marry someone with kids.
That's right. You don't.
And so they would be de facto step-parents.
Right.
Although they might not have the legal...
They may not have the legal claim to the child, but yes, they...
But for the intensive purpose of their relationship with the child, de facto they are the step-parent.
Right.
Okay, so you're not okay with that. So you want the state to come in and dictate who is not allowed to be a step-parent.
No, I'm saying that biology determines who is and is not a parent, and that should be the place where we presume. Biology is where we should presume that these two people, the child and the parent, belong together and the state should not interfere with it. That should be untouchable.
But the biological parent can't even choose who the step-parent should be.
They do it all the time. I'm saying that you should not automatically...
No, I know they can now, but I'm saying you have a problem with that.
No, I am saying that what is going on right now in the legal world as a result of gay marriage is that a woman who gives birth to a baby automatically can say her wife is the other parent of the child, and they have full parental rights, even though that is not a biological parent, and they have not gone through adoption. So a lot of what's happening in the world of gay marriage and family formation is bypassing both biology and adoption, which are the two ways that we have sought to safeguard child rights and well-being across the West.
Let me ask you then of something we've touched on, which is surrogacy and sperm donors. I'm quite interested on the effects of, believe it or not, the sperm donor or the surrogate mother before we come to the effect on the child, which you've hinted at a little bit already. But surrogacy is a growing phenomenon, not least, as I've already said, women having children later and later and perhaps can't, and they're having careers. And so, sometimes you even have the case that they're prioritizing their careers. I've seen this in Hollywood where they'll get a surrogate mother in so that they can keep working. I'm curious in that relationship because the baby, or before we get to the child, the mother losing, let's say you're a surrogate mother out in Ukraine or Georgia or somewhere, and you get a big paycheck to have this child, which is then going to go off. It might be that it's neither your egg nor your sperm.
It usually isn't.
Usually isn't. I know cases where it is sometimes, but I guess that would that change things drastically? But if the baby's is inside you, growing inside you, whether it's or not, it's your egg. When you have to give it off, there must be bonding, right?
Well, and a lot of surrogates would say, "Oh, I don't bond with the child. I know I'm pregnant. I know I'm going to give them away. Of course, I'm not going to bond with them." There's a lot of surrogates that say, "It wrecked me." Generally, they won't allow a woman to serve as a surrogate unless she already has children at home, because she needs somebody else to go home and love when she's empty-armed after the surrogate birth. So it's best practice in the United States, especially for whatever practice they have. They generally won't allow childless women to be surrogates because of that overwhelming impulse to, I love this baby, I can't give them up. They still have that, oh my gosh, I love the baby, I'm going to go home and take care of my 3-year-old. So there is quite an emotional toll, I think, on surrogates, but some of them seem to really enjoy it, consent to it, and benefit from it. So there's definitely a split in the feminist community around this. Probably they follow along the same lines as the sex working debate, where some say, well, this is female empowerment, and this is just women choosing what to do with their own bodies. And then the other half of the radical feminists say, no, this is female exploitation. You don't see a lot of poor women that are employing celebrities to be their surrogates. It's always the other way around. Kim Kardashian isn't going to be anybody's surrogate. Lily Collins isn't either. So it's always like poor, generally brown women who are being rented out by white, wealthy Westerners overall. I mean, I look at that argument and I say, I know a lot of situations, or I've read about a lot of situations where the commissioning parents, the surrogate, the woman who sells their egg, they're all very happy. They're all totally fine with surrogacy. I just think children let's take a hypothetical.
It's a straight family who cannot, for whatever reason, have children, but they do have an egg and a sperm that they can, what's the term?
Fertilize.
Fertilize, sorry. Yeah. And that fertilized embryo goes to a surrogate mother. Now, leaving aside the damage to the possible emotional, all the issues you've described about the surrogate mother, let's say that child comes back to those parents. It is the biological mother and it is the biological father. Are there any downsides for the child in that situation?
Yes. But let me ask you a question first. Who's your mother?
Well, I know who my mother is, yeah.
And what makes her your mother? Tell me some of the things that makes her your mother.
Lots of things, yeah. So,
well, I assume that you think, well, she gave me half of my genetics.
Yeah.
Right? Like she has maybe a lineage where you're like, oh, well, her parents, and they came from, well, I don't know, you guys don't come from other countries. Maybe you're all British and you've always been British, right? But she's from this portion of England and she's the one that carried me, right? Maybe you're thinking, well, she's the one that I I grew inside her womb, and then she nursed me and breastfed me, and then she raised me. And I remember that she would walk me to school every day, and she'd pack my lunches. And the first time I had that breakup, with that one girl, like she consoled me and stayed up with me. Those are probably the things that you think of when you think, that's my mother, right?
Uh-huh.
Okay. So what you've just described is sort of 3 different aspects of motherhood that surrogacy splices into 3 different options. So surrogacy allows us to do what has never been done in the human species, which is to separate genetic mother from birth mother from social mother. All 3 aspects of that are critical pieces. When you think about your mother, my guess is you love all of those parts of her, and they're really meaningful to you because they all matter. They're all very distinct parts of why we love our mothers and are connected to them. That genetic piece is important. It helps us answer the question.
The genetic piece is there.
Right. The social piece is important because
it's there.
And it's there. So surrogacy allows you to isolate the birth mother piece and say we can outsource this one piece. The birth mother portion we can remove from the equation of mother, and we'll just retain the genetic piece and the social mother piece. So the question is this part of the parent-child relationship, the mother-baby bond, does that matter? Or is it the kind of thing that we can just outsource with no consequences to the child? So the answer to that is we don't have studies on it, like I said before, because we're prohibited from testing mother deprivation on infants. What we do know is that the birth mother's body, which is usually also the genetic mother, but the child, when the child is born, they don't know this is my genetic mother or this is, I was born through a donor. They just know that this body, this smell, this voice, this milk, it is her body that more than any other adult drops cortisol levels. It is when the baby is touching the birth mother. For example, we've done you do these heel pricks on babies when they're in the hospital. It actually hurts the baby less to have their heel pricked when the baby is sitting on the mother's chest. That mother's chest, not the nurse's chest, not the father's chest. There's something about her body that soothes the baby. When I argue about surrogacy online and show them the baby being handed off to genetic parents, right, that are fully related to the child, people will say the baby doesn't know any different. And the answer is the baby knows nothing else. The baby knows nothing else. There's no part of the baby's world that they know except for that woman's body, her heartbeat, her smell. So when you disrupt that, when you cut that off, that is what adoptees have long called a primal wound. This loss of the birth mother that has overwhelmingly led children of adoption to have higher rates of externalizing disorders. I should put it this way. Adoptees have more externalizing disorders.
But we're not talking about adoptees, exactly.
Right. We are doing something that's never been done before. We're splicing genetic mother from birth mother, and we're trying to isolate how important is the birth mother aspect. So because we don't have data on the children born through surrogacy, because we've only been doing this for 20 or 30 years, and the products of surrogacy are not old enough to take surveys themselves and respond for themselves how this has impacted them, we have to reason our way through this by looking at things like the impact of mother's milk and the smell of it on children. Or we have to look at it as it relates to how have adoptees fared because they also lost their mother at the moment of birth. We have to reason ourselves to this. I would say in the absence of data, we should probably default to the fact that the only person we are ever connected to by a literal cord might not be an optional person in the life of a child's upbringing. I would say, shouldn't that be sort of our default? And I think that we would see it that way if we were not looking at the adults and what they want as primary. If we were looking at children and their well-being, we would default to saying, hey, I bet that that's not an inconsequential relationship that you can swap out. So I talk about adoptees because...
Well, I mean, I understand why you've framed it like that. But then you come to a position where you have parents who have had children that way, and this is similar to gay parents who have had children in a similar way, is that the children themselves, and I know kids like this, they're wonderful. And so this is the moral challenge, because the implication, I think, or maybe it's not what you're implying, but you go there and the logic is that there's something morally wrong about their existence.
I would
that
say
feels like That's why it's such a gross topic.
Would you say that there's something morally wrong about the existence of a child born through rape?
No, there's nothing. There's nothing morally wrong with the child.
Right.
Right. The deed itself, obviously, couldn't be more morally wrong.
I agree.
But so you're equating. You think it's as morally wrong as rape?
Yeah, I do. What you're talking about.
That's drastic, isn't it?
Let me tell you what that includes. If you've got a gay couple that's using a surrogate to have a child, what are they doing? They are purchasing the child's genetic mother from a catalog. They're going to an egg donor catalog, and it's never donors. They're always selling. Everyone's buying and selling sperm. Nobody's donating sperm and egg, or everyone's buying and selling eggs and sperm. So they're going to a catalog, and they are purchasing the child's genetic mother based on race, based on whether or not she wants to be a known or an unknown donor, based on her education, based on her height and her eye color. They're shopping for their child.
Yeah. By the way, normal heterosexual couples do that when they're finding a partner.
Okay. So the nice thing
in the partner.
Yeah.
That's all those things that's what they're looking for, a genetic mate for their offspring.
Oftentimes. But the nice thing about that is that the child born of that goes, my father loved my mother. They had a relationship with each other. They value her as a person, not just genetic material that they shopped for on an online catalog. You know, what one donor conceived woman said is, in essence, my sperm donor father, was paid $75 to stay out of my life forever. I mean, that's what you're doing. You're paying money to make sure that the child's genetic parent has no contact with them at all. And that parent tends to be very often somebody that the child wants to have a relationship, or at least know the identity of, or at least get accurate medical information from. So you've got a situation where a couple is purchasing a child's genetic material from a catalog. So they're being commodified right there. And then they will create an embryo, usually maybe with the sperm of one of the men. Interestingly, maybe it'll be
okay. So I understand the moral kind of maze and that you're pulling us into on that issue. I thought about that side of things, and it's very difficult from a Christian perspective when you're getting into choosing beyond just choosing your partner. You're choosing. It's a kind of a total minefield, really, morally. But that seems to me to be drastically different moral issue than rape.
You're shopping for children, and you're screening them through eugenics processes. Like, that generally is involved in what IVF is, screening out the undesirables, grading embryos based on certain developmental criteria, sex selection. I mean, what we're doing right now in the world of reproductive technologies, IVF, that is almost always a part of surrogacy, is really close to the closest thing that we've had to human eugenics.
Okay, but
so yes, I think that it's important. It's not violent in the same way. Maybe all of the adults consent to this.
Okay, but important distinctions, by the way.
Yeah, important distinctions. But is the process of buying, selling, designing, and discarding children, should that be more acceptable to us? And the answer is, well, maybe more or less, but it should not be acceptable to us.
Okay, well, if the other option is childlessness, then I wonder, and forgive me for going to the Christian side of things because we're both Christians, but God loves life. And the idea of, just for the sake of the thought experiment being a bit more clear, let's say it's IVF, but there's no surrogate mother and it's both parents, just to tighten the boundaries of this idea. Yes, you are choosing between different embryos and different eggs and et cetera. But the other option of not taking that road is not having children, which I think is worse. There's nothing morally wrong with not having children, but it's a better thing for more life to be in the world, more humanity to be in the world. You disagree with that position?
I want more children. I want more babies. I want lots more babies. And every child, regardless of how they're conceived, are wonderful, made in the image of God, and they deserve respect, dignity, and protection. And I think that begins at the moment of fertilization, whether they're in the womb or out of the womb. Like, if we cannot draw a line about when life begins and that all life deserves protection, then it's very hard to make a case for any other kind of human rights or human protection. So I rejoice at the very small percentage of children made in a laboratory who are born alive. Our best estimate is 2 to 3% of lab-made babies will actually make it onto this side of the womb alive. What is going on in the world of big fertility right now is a mass production of embryos for the purpose of genetically screening and eradicating the undesirables and sex selection. And now, of course, we have several different firms that will do a total genome screening so that you can maybe see the IQ and the height of your child and determine whether or not they're going to possibly be at risk for blindness or early baldness. I mean, the world of big fertility has allowed us to destroy more little lives than abortion, maybe by a scale of fourfold. If you want to make the case, okay, well, we'll go through this IVF process, we won't destroy any embryos, and we won't use any other sperm or egg because we believe children have a right to their mother and father. Good luck. Good luck. Most clinics will not allow you to, and they certainly won't encourage you to take that route. They will encourage you to mass produce embryos so that you can select the ones that you want.
Yes, and they do that because if you're even in that situation in the first place, it's because the likelihood of viable embryos is lower.
High failure rate.
So they want to increase your chances of more life. Mm-hmm. And the best way of doing that is to have the best embryo, is to pick the best embryo.
Right.
And you can't have, if you pick 5, you're not, it's not viable to have all of them, and it's gonna decrease the likelihood of any of the embryos being successful.
Well,
and by successful, I mean successful implementations, not like successful human beings.
I think so you have accurately captured the position that most fertility doctors will present to couples that would like to have a child. At that point, you just have to recognize that you are involved in a process that looks a lot like eugenics because it is eugenics. It is humans deciding who lives or who dies based on certain characteristics or the perceived developmental status.
I understand. Okay, so the moral case for that is going to be hard to make for people who don't believe in God, your position, because they won't. If they don't believe in God, they're going to be like, they'll make the argument which I sort of already did, which is that we all play eugenics when we choose our partner. We're choosing someone. They won't see a distinction there. Although I understand what the point you're making, even from a Christian point of view. Well, rather from a Christian point of view, I haven't got anything else to add except that more life is better than less life. And so it's a horrible thing to have to do. Mm-hmm. But if we want more life, we want more families to have children that are their children, that they are born. That seems to me to be a good that trumps an uncomfortable bad.
What do you mean by their children?
Well, if it's their egg, their sperm, and they give birth to them.
Do you think there's something special about that?
Of course, yeah.
What is it? What's special about having your own genetic child?
Well, I think there's many reasons why it's special, and I think it's also special to if you're courageous enough to adopt, like you've adopted. I think that's a wonderful thing. So, make the point instead of making me squirm.
The point is, there's something special about that.
Uh-huh.
Everybody knows there's something special about that. We can acknowledge it whenever it's the adults talking about what they want. We're like, well, of course you want your own genetic child. But then we very easily turn around and we look at the child with 2 mothers or 2 fathers, or the child who has a single mother by choice.
You're pulling me back into the...
I'm telling you that...
I'm talking about something different.
I know, but you just recognize that there's something sweet and precious about that genetic connection with your child as it relates to you or an adult wanting children. And we turn around and we dismiss it when it's the child who says, why can't I have a relationship with my genetic mother or father? So we always...
But that's not, in my thought experiment, that's not the case I'm making. I'm saying it is both the parents and it's the biological mother who's giving birth to her genetic baby and child. Yes. But your argument against that is that you're playing eugenics when you're taking that route.
When you're talking about...
I'm saying that if you are playing eugenics, the greater good is that there's more life and... you don't have the other downside of the donor situation.
I was just making the point that we've, up to this point, been talking about how, well, I think that these kids with 2 dads or 2 moms are doing fine. Well, or this woman that became a single mother by choice, why not? And the answer is, you just answered it. It's because those children are growing up without their genetic mother or father or both, depending on the arrangement. And we tend to be like, what's your problem? More life. When you just acknowledge there's actually something really special about that genetic connection. It's special from the adult's perspective.
I've acknowledged that from the beginning, though.
It's special to the child, too.
Right. And I think it's important, even if you're pro gay adoption or all these other family formations, to engage properly with the downsides, which is why I was very keen to talk to you, because I think that that's a conversation that not people are too scared to have, or too uptight, or, let's have that conversation.
Let's talk about more life, though, because a lot of people will say, well, we have a population crisis and IVF allows more children to be born, or surrogacy is going to give people the chance to have a child that couldn't have one, and all of that. So we do have a few places in the United States, whether it's companies that are incentivizing, egg freezing or allowing IVF benefits, or states that have covered and subsidized IVF. The UK, your own, oh my gosh, what's the name of your big Department of Health, your HHS?
Yeah.
Okay. So they've done all kinds of subsidizing of IVF treatments, and the highest demographic that's taking advantage of that are single women and lesbians. Okay. So we've done this before, where we've said, okay, look, IVF is a way to make new life, so let's subsidize and encourage it.
Trump, by the way, I don't know if he's implemented it, but in the run-up to his second term, in his campaign, he was saying he's going to introduce, I think, free IVF.
That's what he promised. Yeah. And then he came out with an executive order when we were at ARC last February saying, I'm the granddaddy of IVF, I'm going to make it cheap and free. And after 90 days, there was still no announcement. And then much later, past that kind of deadline for the policy initiative, it came out that they were going to make it more affordable for some fertility drugs, but there wasn't a mandate. And I think that's because there was enough people in his administration that said, this is anti-life, it's anti-MAHA, right? Most of the reasons why people are struggling with fertility.
Pro-IVF is anti-MAHA?
Yeah.
Can you explain that to me?
Yeah, totally. A lot of the reasons why people have infertility, especially if you're 35 and under, those people are often told you have unexplained infertility. The truth is they usually have unexplored infertility. They have not had a diagnosis. Nobody has investigated to see what is causing you and your husband or your wife not to be able to have a child. And there's often something that is health-related. There is sickness or some kind of irregularity, whether it's a hormone imbalance, maybe it's obesity, maybe it's endometriosis or PCOS. Very often there are factors to fertility or infertility that can be targeted and resolved and healed so that you can have a baby on your own. A lot of it is related to our diet. A lot of it is related to environmental factors that can lead women to struggle to get pregnant. And what IVF does in younger women especially is it circumvents fertility rather than working to heal the situations that lead to a woman to need fertility services. So it is anti-MAHA because it does not heal the woman. There are branches of medicine called restorative reproductive medicine. A lot of people have heard about NAPRO technologies, natural procreative technologies, and that's what they do. They work to identify the factors in him or her that is making it more challenging to have a child. And then you heal that. Sometimes it's a fairly easy fix. Sometimes it is a complete endometriosis surgery. But depending on the condition, they have higher success rates than IVF. Sometimes it's a matter of you need to lose 30 pounds because obesity is a real barrier sometimes when it comes to fertility. So a lot of the infertility struggles are actually lifestyle-related issues. And so, yes, there is a direct connection, I think, between the decreasing health of the population as it relates to food choices or activity levels or environmental struggles and infertility. If you're past your kind of prime childbearing windows, that might be a different conversation. But a lot of the people that are told they are infertile actually just have never had somebody actually look at what are the factors leading to their struggle to get pregnant.
My hesitancy to be supportive of state-sponsored IVF is similar to what we've talked about earlier about divorce, which is that if you incentivize women to, that if you tell them, hey, don't worry, you can have IVF.
Yes.
What they don't tell you is, firstly, IVF is unbelievably invasive.
Yeah.
I'm not sure it's more success. The success rates aren't crazy good.
They're not crazy good.
And it's extremely expensive.
Yeah.
And it's by saying it, and I've seen this happen even not at state sponsor, but there's a culture of just freeze your eggs.
Yes.
You can do it later. And what I've seen then is women think that they can wait.
That's right.
But what they don't realize is they're not actually, the chances aren't increased. In fact, they're decreasing.
That's right. And that's the whole point of the few places that we have that have subsidized IVF, whether it's a company or a jurisdiction, we see no change in the overall birth rate. What we see is women putting off childbearing longer.
Right, which will decrease
the birth rate. Right.
Yeah, at the aggregate level.
Right.
Yeah,
that's right.
Look, to tie things all together, there's one part which I'm not sure I fully understand, and it's still, having heard you speak, it's your personal story. It's you speak lovingly again about your mother, and you've not, again, this doesn't seem to be against homosexuality in our conversation, but it's still the case that clearly your position will be called. I mean, I think at one point you even joked that you were. It was Ask the Bigot was the name of your blog. So,
right.
As you said, you know that the progressives are calling you bigoted and all these ideas bigoted. But it's still. What's the part of the journey? And maybe I've missed this, where you decided to go from coming from that background to speaking out like this?
It's because the redefinition of marriage, and honestly, all these other marriage and family questions, whether it is how we think about divorce or cohabitation or reproductive technologies, even adoption, what I saw in all of those different spheres was obsessive focus on adults and their desire and their wants and their struggles and their challenges, and children were not represented. And children are harmed when they lose their mother or father, whether it's to divorce or reproductive technologies,
so
or
that
because
was so morally offensive to you.
Well, I had
that
just
you
been
decided, you know what? Actually, I'm going to speak out about this.
The truth is, I had been working in some capacity with kids for 2 decades at that point, volunteering at a high school youth group when I was in college. And then I worked at a Chinese adoption agency. So I had a lot of familiarity with children who had been adopted. And then we did junior high ministry and senior high ministry. And then I became a mom myself, and I had all of their friends in my home. And I mean, I just have had a lot of close contact with children in a variety of different ways. And I'll tell you what, if you want to wound a child and hamper them for life, cut them off from their mom or dad. I mean, it very often creates a lifelong wound. And children often will figure out ways to adapt and get over it, sort of. But I mean, I still talk to people who are 70, whose father ran out on them when they were 6, and they still can't talk about it without crying because they interpret it as a rejection of them. Very, very often, children whose mother or father is not in their life, they come to the conclusion, it must be me. It must be me. There must be something unlovable about me. So
your journey is actually despite your mother's, and it's.
Oh yeah, when I started writing about this, I never talked about my family at all.
But it was because of some experience with other humans,
it's
other
because
children,
I work with kids,
and you saw what was happening.
Because you see these kids so damaged, and when you have a lock-in in the church, and you've got 50. 12 and 13-year-olds in sleeping bags all across the floor of the gym, and that one kid wants to stay up and talk with you. And why are they bawling? It's because their mother left them, and she lives in another state, and now she has new kids with some other guy, and she must love them more than she loves me. And you can't, and we call it a primal wound because this importance of knowing your own mom and dad and feeling like they love you and that they love each other. It is like soul food for kids. And when they lose it, they are harmed and they are sad. And sometimes that happens to tragedy, and we mourn, and good adults work to step in, maybe heroic step-parents or a system that says that we are going to place these children in loving, vetted homes if they've lost their mom or dad. But we cannot normalize, encourage, incentivize, promote, or commercialize the loss of a child's mother or father. To me, it was I am going to weaponize the greatest wound a child can experience so that I can push this progressive idea of family. And that's what did it for me. Now I'm now it's war. Now it's war.
Well, on that note, Katy, great to speak to you. I love to be challenged, and I really appreciate you laying everything out for me. Is there anything you'd like to bring viewers and listeners' attention to? Your books maybe, or your advocacy work, anything, if they want to learn more about Katy Faust and your world, where might you direct them?
Well, we have the first book you mentioned, Them Before Us, Why We Need a Global Children's Rights Movement, that I co-authored with Stacey Manning. It's the handbook of everything we just talked about. It is all of the studies on how divorce curtails a child's physical, mental, emotional, academic health, relational health. It is all of the studies that we have on same-sex parented homes, critiquing the supposed no difference studies and looking at the actual data. It is that explanation of surrogacy and how there's no surrogate arrangement that does not require a child lose one or more of those three mothers. It is the stories of children created through sperm and egg donation, whether they are raised by a single heterosexual or homosexual couple, talking about the commodification and identity struggles. It's the data on biological parents and literally how we can measure that they give more money and more time and more protection to kids. So it's like, if anything I've said today, you're like, where's the data? You come right over. I've got your data right here. We have our second book is called Raising Conservative Kids in a Woke City. And it's just kind of parenting. How do you instill a conservative, biblical, sane moral view in your kids, even when the world has gone insane? Stacy and I co-authored that again. And we've raised our kids in Seattle, largely in public schools. None of them have blue hair.
Wow.
They're all wonderful.
You managed to avoid the Chaz zone. Was it the Chaz zone?
Yeah, Chop Chaz.
Yeah.
Chop Chaz. We decided not to go there, the place where they didn't believe in borders, that they erected borders, and they wanted a gun-free zone, but everybody kept getting shot. And
how is your book selling in Minneapolis these days?
I know. I'm actually going to head there next. Yeah, I'm going to drop right down in the middle of the protests.
Very popular, yeah.
Yeah, they love me in Minneapolis. And you can go to thembeforeus.com and sign up, and I will trigger you twice a week.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Katy Faust, a great pleasure.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for watching The Winston Marshall Show with Katy Faust. Head over to winstonmarshall.co.uk, where you'll enjoy not only ad-free viewing and listening, but you'll have exclusive content and the opportunity to ask future guests your questions. Otherwise, please remember to subscribe, and until next time, be well.